Urban Questions, a collaborative event with Write SSA and the Adelaide Fringe. I'm your MC host for tonight. I'm Devon. Nice to meet you all. So some housekeeping things before we start. Tonight's event is being live streamed, so please have your phones on silent. We will have about a 10-minute break before everybody gets too angsty. But so for toilet breaks, a drink and a chat. Women's toilets are down the ramp and men's toilets are near the concession stand. Before we begin, acknowledgement of country.
Nyangi Nyanguai, we are the first peoples of the River Murray and Mallee. Our laws and customs crisscross this country, and we acknowledge our custodians of our lands and waters. Nawai, Nanguruku, Nyinte, Nrolti, Narket, Marwang. We also give respect to the Irowerong people's land that we are present on. We are grateful in continuing to acknowledge and share the recognition of our people. Thank you.
So, what brings us all here tonight? Like I said earlier, Counter Urban Questions is a project that Write SSA and Adelaide Fringe has presented to regional writers. Tonight they will be answering the question, what does it mean to live and tell stories in rural Australia? First up, we have Tumu King, writer who enjoys, he is a writer who enjoys all aspects of the creative process, frequently bites off more than he can chew with his passion of learning, and has recently begun poetry and become a little addicted. Since then, his passion is now helping others refine their craft. Please welcome him up to the stage.
It wasn't meant to be. It's bright up here. So I'm reading the Nativity of an Obscuous sorrow. Not all sorrows are sad. Some of them are old friends, ready to be picked up again on days when we return to the ancient archives of our lives, dust off the memory books and wonder, what happened to them? My sorrows are not universal, but I hope you'll know some of them in some capacity or have some passing familiarity with them and welcome me in celebrating the arrival of a new one. If you don't, I hope you're either very young or I'm a very poor judge of what constitutes a shared experience. Please come forward, stay in your seats though, and meet Auspicious, the wishful omen of the first sign of the autumn. A subtle coolness in the shadows, a rustling of dead leaves abandoned by their parents on the pavement, or a long skein of geese sweeping overhead like the second hand of a clock striking 13. Sonder, the realization or discovery that everyone around you, including strangers passing you by on the street, have a life as complex as your own, which they are constantly living and trapped within, just like you. It is the feeling of smallness and insignificance that precedes nihilism before the heat death of empathy robs you of compassion. Rigor Sampsa is a psychological skeleton we develop from childhood that protects us from anxiety and trauma. It is the tree houses within your brain with bracken and thistle twisted on the outside. Making friends as an adult is so hard when we have to navigate each other's trials. Rigor just wants to keep you safe, and sometimes safety is in loneliness. Mikhail Bakhtin is not a sorrow. He was a Russian philosopher, and he wrote about carnivals, truth, and community. And he's going to help me, not literally, talk about creativity in the regions. An often used analogy for gifted children is a cheetah, which is an odd word, isn't it? It comes from a derivative of a Sanskrit word meaning adorned or painted. A gifted child is often compared to a cheetah because the animal's defining characteristic is its speed. Without it, in a cage, can it really be a cheetah? The same is often applied to a gifted child. If they are not given freedom and space to express, to run, to paint, to adorn the world around them, are they not the same as any other child? Writing in a remote community has always given me that space, the freedom to run, experiment, to paint and adorn my surroundings with my oddities. Mikhail wrote about a range of topics, but one which always struck out to me is the notion of the carnival, that truth and consensus is only ever reached through community discourse, which runs the gamut of stakeholders. Is it possible to find truth in cities as Mikhail defines it? I don't think so. You can unearth smaller pockets of truth here and there. Where's the best kebab shop? What's the best winery? But approaching absolute truth is as difficult to accomplish with Mikhail as anything else, which I think as it should be. Historians have long since given up. The past is a rich tapestry, and to do a story justice, we unravel it one thread at a time. The trick is to make sure you don't return to the same strand every time. Study it exclusively and consider it the definitive edition. Truth and storytelling is a tricky thing. We don't always pay much attention to our sorrows, but they have helped me guide myself to truths of self, which are sometimes easier to ignore. And it's so easy to distract ourselves with the prettiness of the present moment, isn't it? That's why I'm here to welcome the birth of a new sorrow, Chitara, the truth painter, whose inkwells never run dry. Chitara is the love of movement and finds a picture in every frame of life. It is the antidote to boredom, but also restlessness and dissatisfaction. It is the celebration of giveness and living your truth. But it also needs space to run.
That's not going to work. Thank you, Tibri. Next we have Belili Valkyrie, awesome last name. She is from Port Lincoln, and she is a storyteller and creative, currently working part-time and parenting full-time. Writing has always been a quiet passion of hers, most works never leaving her notebook or other writers. She has told stories and shared life learnings through performance and exhibitions in recent past. And as a mother, she is always hoping to encourage her son to believe himself and wants to lead by example.
Thank you. This piece is called Guest List. I'm getting married in just over a month. Not long now, long list of to-dos still to do. Why is this part of our conversation today? Thank you for asking. I'll gladly tell you. As the guest list grew, who knew who did too, and the potential dramas ensue. I'm the kind of person that collects a friend here and a basically family there. Completely different walks of life, different areas, different wife. But I live in a small town. An amalgamation of loved ones you might expect to be meeting for the first time. But over a glass of wine, I'm sure most people will know soon who's slept with who's not on good terms, who doesn't live together for good reason now, who's had a fallout and how. Big towns, small cities, most of us have seen each other's titties. In these places, most of us know each other's faces, and it's great practice to learn how to get along with anyone. Yep, even them. Of course, you can choose not to. No one's saying you have to be polite anymore. After all, what's a wedding without a fight on the dance floor? You might just not get invited to the next one, and you might get in trouble with your best friend's mum, whose boyfriend's cousin's son was the one you laid your fists on. I'm excited for family and friends travelling here for the big day, some for the first time. Most coming over are from the city, an expensive flight or a whole day's travel just to see my fiancé become forever mine. There are nerves that come with showing loved ones our home, a place intimately woven in our own memory, entirely new to their eyes. I wonder if they'll agree on the place that I think has the best fries. I'm sure every town has the place that gets labelled the best or the worst, the secret spot that everyone goes to, or the cafe that everyone walks past. It's been there forever, while a lot of the new ones don't last. I don't think those from the cities would have the same experience, would they? I'll have to ask. Sometimes that's what I dislike about counter-urban living, to be honest. That one place that will always be this, that one person that will always be that. When you told them what you wanted to be when you grew up became an unspoken promise. Change feels hard here, slow and grinding. Everyone's so comfortable in where they are, except those who are not. I loved to surprise people growing up. It wasn't hard. Spend a couple of years in high school as the quiet girl, and then just speaking up will make their brain whirl. Lately, I've noticed that the more I grow, the less I want to change, though. Small comforts, fond nostalgia. Suddenly, I don't want things to change so much either. But that shocked friends again, because they had started to expect the surprises. I think feelings like that often arrive in us when big things do start to change. New friends, new vocation, a funeral, or a wedding. Finding comfort in the little things when life gets strange. I think my hope for our little towns, favourite places, big thinking in small spaces, is that we learn to make change and appreciate what doesn't need to. Maybe a little less of punching others' faces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, that was beautiful. Our next piece is from Brittany Hocking. Brittany does not consider herself a poet. She is a mum to 3 beautiful hurricanes, praying for her sanity daily. And she lives an active way and gets through the day with a bit of luck, sarcasm, and a lot of coffee. Please welcome her.
I was so prepared. Now it won't open. Right. It doesn't have a name. We'll figure it out as we go along. Let's just call it that. We'll figure it out as we go along. Okay. Hearts on stone, like bone and shears, tearing flesh free from flesh as she shakes the cage of skin free. Watching how the ink of tattoos dwells in familiar softness, harsher now on the pale of the concrete, flowing violently down broken legs and limbs, swelling violently and pulls at her feet, dripping from fingertips slowly and freely like bloodletting, swilling and staining teeth of the mouths who drink willingly. The wake of the emptiness is sodden and ice cold, the absence of warmth, blades of ice making a home in the foundations of herself, her soul the seat of the darkest of things and the nightmares that chase them from their sleep. Follow their eyes to the legs that dangle and swing from the ropes that brush the water as it ripples below, smiling to them and daring them to leap. Hung for a moment, a pirouette in the sky before the fall from the air to the murky black of the water as they loosen clutching fingers to feel the moment before the pull of gravity, the tug of air on limb. Places that feel like the absence of home have an emptiness to them, a feeling like a wholly different person is walking in shoes that used to be mine, and when I look down I still see my feet and I tell them to walk, but they don't know how. I ask them instead if they'd like to dance. It's like rhythm speaks to the soul of places and the people within them. This world is hard and dark, Harder and darker still to come, I keep thinking, and I dwell on that. Easy is all I've ever wanted, and hard is where I seem to live. But a sense of lightness lives just around the corner, and I can see them. They're the friend you often visit, but only for a moment, and only when you're already heading out on another date. They're the ones you really want, but glances and touches of secrecy are all that live in the full chest of the life that they get to live, but cannot offer or share. The garden outside, it glows, not with light, but with wicks, who click and hiss in the dark, cradling silky black around it like the arms of a friend. Words pour from my mouth now, which used to be frozen in place, gagged and filled with tar and cotton, locked away by the fear of what could be said and never taken back. The words, sunshine, shade, are the tether to which I find myself bound to a land flat and frozen in time, but floating, reaching above the clouds with self-consciousness stabbing in the dark. A rock pitched at the mirror it holds up to me, beckoning me to begin again, find more words and take more time. Let the dread and hope and pain flow free from my lips like the slick and cold slime of the river which both binds and carries away. Down the hips and legs of the lands, curvy and graceful, a far-off dream once alive for me, dark and unforgiving like the mask I wear, to ward off any friends whose kinship is only as deep as the weather permits. A path of mud, thick like the regrets I wear on my shoulders, is the one I'm chained to, but the words and the places they cry, the walls where they sing out, and the corners of the staircase of a mind that are swept free of dust and places to hide. These words that slip free from these confines cry tears of pain and joy and heartbreak, of deep regret and gratitude for the ones that listen, who take in, who relate, who cry in their own darkness, their hearts in their hands, healing all that's broken.
Thank you, Brittany. And personally, I think you should consider yourself a poet. Okay, so next up we have Poppy Moyle Reid. Recently, she has graduated from Narrowcourt High, and her interest in literature inspired her to undertake work experience with Narrowcourt News, developing knowledge under journalist Eliza Bellage. Poppy uses storytelling to help herself understand complicated and yet collective feelings.
I think this needs a big... Can you hear me? Good? Yep. I haven't got a name for my piece either, but you can help me out with that later. Long sweeping bends, music all the way to the destination. Down-to-earth friends, love with strong foundations. Buildings like the red gum trees, standing strong for hundreds of years. Tipping potato harvesters, work forcing you to face your fears. The wine running smooth like water into the lake. Loving parents, always giving more than they take. Sport fueling the community, generations coming together. Farmers cursing the never-ending change of weather. Working with the seasons, running on little sleep. I wouldn't trade my country childhood for anything. Growing up in a regional area can bring some challenges to the surface of what may appear a very easygoing, relaxed lifestyle. And don't get me wrong, for the most part it is. I wouldn't change my life for the world. I love the sound of birds when I wake in the morning. I love seeing every single star in the night sky. I love the serenity of the open paddocks, and I love watching the sunset over Cockatoo Lake. My name is Poppy, and this is how I feel about the ups and downs of living in regional South Australia. Words are powerful, and the way in which we put them together can either ruin or make someone's day. They can open someone's heart or close it altogether. They can open a mind over something they never imagined their mind would open to. And just sometimes, there is even more to be said from the words that are left unsaid. It was always crazy to me that all the kids at school loved music, but for most of them, it was uncool to participate with enthusiasm in music lessons or write poetry in English class. It wasn't the done thing to understand the lyrics, which are literally relating to the lives we are living. Poetry is a part of music, and instruments must be played to create those million-dollar rhythms. I've always tried my best to run my own race. However, I will admit that the choice to continue doing the not-so-mainstream hobbies took more persistence with my confidence to not let what others think stop me. My full-steam-ahead mindset to do what I want usually won, because deep down I knew that I shouldn't care what others will think or say. However, at the same time, I had a devil on my shoulder asking me if I wanted to fit into the society of school. The hesitation would come and go as I heard words of others, inflating or popping my balloon of self-confidence. As I got older, I realised that I was the one who decided if I needed to or wanted to fit in, and I became comfortable in my place, which wasn't exactly in nor out. It was just right where I needed to be. There is a stereotypical view that opportunities cannot be found in the country. Kids must move away to a city, either to boarding school or start a degree at university in order to make something out of themselves. However, I believe that wasn't the case. Of course, if you want to become a brain surgeon, that would require a university degree in a big hospital located in the city. But for me, I didn't want to move away from my country lifestyle, and standing up here tonight is an example that one thing leads to another and opportunities will turn up if you create a life that they can walk right into. Looking back on my younger self, I couldn't be more thankful that I never stopped playing guitar or writing poetry or singing in what seemed like at the time insignificant places. However, now I can see that they were opportunities. And slowly, very slowly, one thing led to another, and with encouraging words from my mum here and there, I had the confidence to keep going. It's all about perspective, and I try to live life looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. At times, yes, it was hard to find like-minded people in my area, or somebody who knows all the things that I don't even know that I don't know yet. But on the contrary, it doesn't take 100 people, it only takes one. I found that one person, and she got me started on this journey. A simple conversation about the music that I write, and she thought maybe Write As I Say would be the perfect opportunity for me. Like writing, life can be full circle sometimes, and although it doesn't seem like a long time ago since I was an even younger girl learning guitar and beginning to navigate my way through my teenage years, it was 6 years ago. 6 years since I began to learn guitar and sing my way through life. However, back then there wasn't anybody doing what I was doing that I could look up to. Lucky for me, I had Taylor Swift. She was my biggest inspiration with my music, and I admired everything about her journey. I remember in Year 10 English class, we were asked to write a persuasive speech about who we think the most inspirational person is, and of course, I wrote about Taylor. Everyone paid me out. Even the teacher thought I should change my topic and told me, "I think you can write about something better than that." Well, all the doubt from everyone soon lifted once I read it aloud in class. My teacher saying, "Poppy, I think I need to take my words back." I thought that's the incredible power of words. They open a mind over something they never imagined their mind would open to. Fast forward to the present, and now I am teaching young girls guitar, hoping to inspire them to continue doing what they love, being that person to them that I didn't have when I was their age. I have thought about how my life would be different if I was dealt the hand of living in the city. The possibility of a private school with specialised subjects, surrounded by like-minded people, more coaches and facilities for my netball or tennis, right on my back doorstep. However, I was dealt the country life instead, and now it's up to me to use the cards this offers to their highest potential. Long straight roads, music for the young and old. Friends more like sisters, both their love like pure gold. Old catchphrases rolling off the tongue like water into a tank. Loving parents who do it all, yet I always forget to thank. Homemade cooking and wide open space. That fox stealing my Birkenstock without leaving a trace. You can't make new old friends or build more land, so hands help hands and Mum will always understand. Working with the seasons, running on little sleep, I wouldn't trade my country childhood for anything. Thank you.
Good job, Poppy. Thank you. Our last reader before our break is Josh King. He is a writer and musician from Mount Gambier, and he has worked with Writers SA on several projects and commissions. He is one half of the duo Sexy as Shit, who have music on all streaming platforms. He is an emerging interest in the way music and storytelling can interact with each other in exciting ways.
Thank you. Let me know if the lights are blinding anyone off my head. It happens a lot. This piece is called On Work, which is a bit ironic because I try to avoid it when I can. But so let me know if you have any better suggestions at the end. What do you do? It's the worst question I ever hear on a night out or a date or at a function I don't want to be at to begin with. It's so common and such a narrow way to view everybody, but I do it myself. I can't blame them. What do? I mean, I smoke occasionally, I make my own pasta, and I try to get enough fibre to stay happy and healthy. But these aren't the things that people mean when they ask me, what do you do? We're always talking about occupation. My occupation is a shop clerk at Big W, and I say shop clerk because it's more traditional and more romantic than saying I put nappies on shelves. I pick up tissues left behind by children, I hope they're children's, and find the odd missing bed sheet for an old woman who's dead set on the pattern that's going to make her guest room sparkle. These take up my time, most of the time, from Monday to Friday. Although when people ask me what I do, I always say that I'm a musician. I'm a musician, and yet here you are listening to me read something that I've written. Have I stiffed you? Have I conned you and stolen a commission by pulling the wool over your eyes? Or can I be a musician and a writer? If I can, am I a musician who's writing, or am I a writer who's making music? The last month has seen me writing words a lot more than music, so my identity has been very conflicted, to put it mildly. My inner weather has the temperament of a musician. I sing when I'm bored and I make up silly songs to entertain kids or show someone I'm flirting with that I'm clever. But I read more than I listen to music these days, and I find it easier to turn an idea into a poem than a song. Perhaps you can only be one at a time, and you're catapulting between all your identities as you need them, like borrowed clothes that only fit depending on how much you've eaten and if the weather's been too poor for running. I like making pasta, making the dough and cutting it to whatever shape I choose. Linguine, fettuccine, ravioli if I'm feeling a little spicy. It's one of the most pleasurable things I do for myself, and while I'm kneading, I don't feel like a musician or a writer, but I feel like a man who's trying to just feed himself and his family, maybe some friends. I'm also a man who smells of wet dough. It's not very pleasant. It's incredible that I can make pasta for a few hours and view myself as a small C chef, yet I can work at Big W for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and still I don't identify with it. I like the people that I work with. I don't dread it when I wake up every morning, but it's not what boots me out of bed, so I find it hard to say that that is what they're going to put on my headstone. The truth is, I don't know what they should put on my headstone, but I'm getting a pretty good idea of what they shouldn't. This form of identity crisis isn't new to me. It's one of the few constants I can rely on in my life. Every couple of years, a dread will form in the pit of my stomach, and it will ask me who I am. It's a terrible voice too. It's not very intimidating, but it's annoying and deep, a bit like mine, and it sticks with me for months. Then, by some magic stroke, I answer it with the right phrase, some magic sentence that, like a spell, will just make everything disappear. Until spring the next year, when I should be focusing on getting my tan ready for summer, rather than who I'm meant to be as a person. Then, I get to start all over again, and struggle to remember what magic phrase cured me the last time. The crisis I'm familiar with is different this time, though. Maybe it's because I'm older. Maybe it's because I'm a bit more active in the identities I've stolen than I have been in the past. Or maybe it's because it was triggered by someone I love very much dying very slowly. Either way, the crisis feels a lot hollower than it used to, and I think I can see through it a lot more clearly than the last time it happened. It's a crisis of laziness. The world is full of people who identify themselves with the things they would do if they had the time. I understand I'm as guilty of it as anybody. If I had more time, I'd get much more done. But having someone close to you die in a nasty way is a very good reminder that all you really have and can call your own is the time you got. I love being an artist, and it's one of the few things that keeps me going through life. There's a great love for the world you can get when you see it reflected through your work and the time you spend to make it. People think there are a lot of difficult things about being an artist: technique, style, and the most difficult that people seem to find is coming up with the ideas. What people don't realise is that for me, and for a lot of people that I spend time with, the hardest part is doing the art. It's sitting down, or standing, I'm not going to judge you, and committing yourself to the time and the experience of making whatever you want to put in the world. There are much better things you could be doing in the short time. Eating, masturbating, napping, they're all much more fun moment by moment than working is. And they've tripped me up many times. But they don't sit in you once you've finished, like work done well does, warming you up from the inside. Art's secret weapon is that the pleasure is cumulative, and the joy of each moment snowballs until you reach the end and you have something to give or show or perform for someone or a bunch of people in a high school theatre, and have a much deeper, lasting sense of joy as your reward. But even this doesn't last forever. When I was young, I wanted one perfect album, one good book. That's all I wanted. I wanted to do something great and then retire satisfied by a pool and drink margaritas, getting fat. The more I work, the more I realise the gap between the ideas in my head and the ideas you bring into the world is quite large. It needs to be. An artist isn't an unmoved mover forcing their will on the world without consequence. We can try to force our will upon the world, but we can't succeed without the world also forcing its will back onto us. It's a terrifying thing, it's an irritating thing, but it's also the only thing that really makes the art worth doing for the artist. I'll never get my perfect piece, and I'm starting to make my own peace with that. My occupation, I don't think, really matters. It makes no difference if I'm a writer or a musician or a nappy putter-upper, a big W, and that is a word, I've checked. The only thing that matters is that I never get to retire. I worked yesterday, I'm working today, and I hope like hell that I get the chance to work tomorrow. I think that I found my magic spell, and this time I'm going to try and write it down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we will have our short break, so go pee, go snack. We'll be back in 15 minutes for our next reader. Welcome back. First up, well, not first, but we have Emma Richardson. Emma, who uses she/they pronouns, is a queer writer and theatre maker from SA, passionate about telling honest queer stories that highlight the full LGBT experience and community. She has been a member of Carclew's Expressway Arts Ensemble since 2014. Through this program, Emma has stepped into multiple writing, acting and directing roles over a number of projects. Unfortunately, Emma can't be with us, but Timu is going to be reading on her behalf.
And Devon wonders, does he do this to make my life hard? The answer is yeah. Yeah, I do. I'm reading Seasons of Change. I moved away this year. I moved from the country. I moved from my family. I left home. A small, very rectangular house sits almost alone in the middle of paddocks full of cows and sheep. Our neighbours live close by in the big house. 7 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, a tennis court, and an in-ground pool that they never used. Mum would joke and say we used to live in the servants' house, which turns out wasn't really a joke. One day they told us the groundskeeper really did used to live here. The carpet inside is worn down flat. Most of the doors are warped and won't close all the way. And little families of mould make their home in the hard-to-reach corners of the high ceilings. But we don't complain. We're used to worse. Paid a lot more for worse too, which is why we, and by we, I mean Mum, decided to move us out here. We couldn't afford the comfy suburbs where we both grew up, close to schools and shops and friends. So by luck, acquaintances and word of mouth, we heard of a little property sitting empty and waiting. We moved in the middle of July and quickly found out The ancient heating and cooling unit in the wall could only be used for about an hour before it started choking and smoking and turned itself off. "That's fine," Mum would say. "We have jumpers." I never realised how cold it could get out here. I had this image of what rural life was like, and in my mind it was hot, like summer, all year round. Red dirt and tumbleweeds and a cow skull baking in the sun. But it got cold. It was a cold I'd never really felt before, an intense cold that made your muscles ache. A cold that made you want to be in bed at 4 p.m. because the electric blanket was the only thing that could stop the shivering. "We can get chickens," I remember Mum saying excitedly in the car after we saw the house for the first time. It was a raining, pathetic, misty rain the whole time, dampening us as we walked from the car. I scrunched my nose, only thinking of old-timey movies where the kids have to get up at rooster's crow to clean out the chicken coops and milk the cows every morning. I wasn't interested in fresh eggs and clucking birds, but Mum was excited. I'm not sure if her excitement came from an honest joy and want of chickens, or from country living, or if it came a sort of desperation, a need for all this to be okay, for this house and the drive to work and the family to just be okay. Spring. The paddocks surrounding our house were occupied by either sheep or cow. The owners rotated them every so often, but it would always line up that the sheep were in the nearest paddocks when all the lambs were being born. I would watch them out of my bedroom window as they would chase each other and run circles around their mothers. My favourite thing was when a sheep had twins, tiny little creatures, barely standing upright, but side by side, learning and playing. Mum would always point them out to me and immediately follow it up with the story of how she was going to have a pet lamb when she was a kid, how they found it abandoned by its mother, small and sickly, and that my grandparents let Mum keep it, raise it, and care for it until it died of old age. After Mum would tell the story, I would joke that we could simply hop over the barbed wire fence and take a little lamb for ourselves. Mum would laugh and of course say no. We moved to the house in the first few years of me being a teenager. I was a lonely kid already, but now there was almost an hour's drive between me and my friends, which to some may not be a challenge, but there were no buses around and I couldn't drive. I had to rely on Mum to chauffeur me back and forth, and I knew how expensive petrol was. And though Mum tried not to talk about it, I knew our financial situation. Kids see the changes when money gets tight. They see Mum's hair growing longer than she likes because she can't spare the money for a hairdresser, or the worn down shoes that haven't been replaced yet. I just stopped going out. Summer. We were lucky in the first 5 years. The summer having never brought fire to our door, until it did. I don't know whether it was some caveman gene suddenly awakened, or a small lick of psychic powers I didn't know I had, but something in me told me to get up and look out the window. A water pump had surged and caused sparks, which caught the dry grass. Fire began blackening the fields before it jumped the road and started on the neighbour's property. If the wind had changed after the fire started, we would have been burned up before we knew it was happening despite my newfound clairvoyance. The summers after that one became cruel. After the first fire, I packed a big duffel bag full of my special and irreplaceable possessions: framed photos, birthday cards, letters written to me by my friends, and the complete X-Files DVD box set. The absolute essentials for if we had to get in the car and go with a moment's notice. Everyone remembers those fires, the time the country burned and the PM said, "Gee, that's gotta suck," and then left us for dead. One of the hardest times during those fires was when Mum called me, frantic, begging me to come home because there was a fire too close and we needed to pack up the animals in case we had to go. I cried the whole long drive home. I will never regret, blame, or judge Mum for moving us out there. We did what we needed to do to keep a roof over our heads, and it was because of that move I found communities of people like me, people who lived what I lived, felt the same loneliness and isolation, and escaped in the same way as I did. And now, having left the country for a city-adjacent life, I feel an odd pull in my chest, a quiet whispering longing for the place I used to call home. And I think maybe, one day, I could go back.
Thank you, Emma. Sorry you couldn't be here, and thanks again, Timu. Next up, we have Sage Wilde. Sage, who goes by they, them, is a non-binary artist, writer, musician, emerging producer, and dreamer. They are passionate about mental health, food, and neurodiverse-centered art. Their work reflects the ups and downs of navigating early adulthood, having survived childhood trauma. They explore what it means to be openly queer in a small community and the depth of life.
Hello. Do I need some help with this second microphone here? Thanks, Luke. I'm always so nervous when I get up here. Thank you.
magic of the clouds and stars as I turn into wind. I forgot my own lyrics. Let me try that again. The magic of the clouds and stars as I turn into wind. And even though I'm invisible, you'll always greet me as a friend. Ooh, oh, because nothing ever happens here, so all we do is dream of all the ways this riverland breathes. Because nothing ever happens here, so all we do is dream of all the ways this riverland breathes. she breathes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sage. For our next piece, it's from Sarah Hopgood. Sarah can't be with us tonight, so we'll keep Sage nearby. Sarah is an army wife working in the financial industry. Growing up in regional Victoria, she devoted her spare time to scribbling stories and reading. As a teenager, her creative writing shifted to musical pursuit, composing lyrics and melodies on piano. 10 years after closing her notebook due to mental health and career changes, inspiration struck, and she's been dedicated to improving her craft ever since.
I took these off to combat some stage fright, and it actually worked. And I need them to read. This one's called Ashes to Green. It starts with smoke, a thin charcoal plume rising from the thickets and dry shrub, stretching upwards to create a stark contrast against the azure sky. Dread flickers in the hearts of those who know, the ones who remember what has come so many times before, yet acknowledge the uncertainty paired with it. The absence of predictability still strikes fear. Sirens screech like a harrowing keen, echoing across the countryside as a warning of what's to come, to remain alert. Communities are roused and wary. A blistering gust carries an acrid stench that invades the nostrils. It stings the eyes and coats the back of the throat. It lingers in the air, asserting its presence. Within minutes, the plume widens into a thick, black wall, devouring vegetation, living beings, anything of a combustible nature. The more it consumes, the quicker it grows, shooting embers and sparks ahead of its path to multiply. It spreads rapidly like a weed, clinging to anything in its path, unbothered by treasured memories. The flickers of dread intensify. We check social media alerts. We heed warnings. Prayers are thrown into the hot air, hoping for rain, a cool change, a sudden gust to divert its path, anything to counteract the imminent fiery rage. Preparations are made in haste. Pets, loved ones, precious keepsakes, basic necessities. As the flames inch closer, we make the choice, evacuate or risk it. Wrangling young children and animals who don't understand the urgency of precious minutes between escaping and bracing the brunt. New alerts flash across television screens, banners of breaking news accompanied by flashing lights of red, blue, orange. Trucks barrel down dirt roads, disappearing into the black smoke. Aircraft fly into the red zone, dumping water on the incensed flames, ravaging the countryside, incinerating the dry forests, feeding off the blistering winds. Smoke shrouds the remaining limited visibility. Alerts say it's too late to evacuate. The roads are no longer safe. Those who evacuated are left anxious and wondering, is their home still standing? Did the neighbours leave as well? Has everything important been accounted for? Those who remain must rely on their preparations and wits to protect their homes and themselves. Others are caught off guard, forced to accept it's too late. They must now sit and wait, hopeful they will be spared the wrath. No matter which path is chosen, each feels the panic clawing at the throat, the icy grip of fear takes on the heart. Eventually, whether it's days or weeks later, it's contained, leaving behind charred debris and incinerated fields. The pungent stench of smoke has travelled thousands of kilometres, coating the country in a thin haze. For some, a light singe tarnishes the edges of their home, or perhaps emergency services were able to halt the flames mere steps away from the front door, leaving a harsh and confronting black line in the grass, a reminder of how close it had come. For others, homes and livelihoods are destroyed. Crops are ruined, homes smoking and caved in, too unsafe to even chance venturing in to sift through the wreckage. And all these people, some broken and some whole, each seek solace in one another. Communities band together for support, food drives, offering their belongings to those in need, fundraisers and donations. The fallen trees, still some emitting the orange glow of burning embers inside the charred trunk, will be cleared. Carcasses of livestock and native animals are disposed of. The animals who survived with debilitating burns are granted a compassionate end. And yet, no matter how small the affected may seem in comparison to the country overall, the nation unites, offering support. The promise to rebuild always burns bright. As the weeks and months pass, the charred trunks begin to sprout. Tiny green seedlings emerge from the blackened fields. And despite the uncertainty, each new bud brings hope.
Thanks again, Sage, and thanks, Sarah, for that lovely piece. Our final reader tonight is Annika Parenta. Annika, sorry, I always got that wrong. Annika is an 18-year-old writer based in Port Lincoln. She enjoys using different art forms to explore her experiences. She is still developing her own style, but has had the opportunity to work with other artistic people through film, dance, music, writing, and photography that have influenced her. Annika cannot be with us tonight, so we'll bring back Brittany to the stage to read Annika's piece.
Annika's piece is called An Old Man of the Sea. A port is a harbour city, somewhere ships can anchor away from storms. A haven. There is such a place on the Eyre Peninsula, a sleepy little town with a rich history in the fishing industry. But in the marina, a granite statue stands waiting, hopeful. A way to remember those unable to make it back to the safety of the little town. A final resting place for souls lost to the deep. A white wooden boat idles on the surface as shining fins slice through the crystal waters. Men in waders stand in the racks hanging from the back of the boat, bamboo poles in hand, flicking lines into the frenzied school. Sleek, grey and blue bodies are pulled from the water and tossed over shoulders onto the deck in mists of salt. A father and son stand in the racking, dented metal helmets atop their sweat-covered hair, their lines feeding down to the same lure. As a little boy, the son would go down to the dock with his mother and watch his father unload, and watch as fat, glistening tuna were lifted from the boat. He remembers missing him when he was away and asking his mother, "When's Daddy coming home?" Watching the bay for signs of the fleet's return. An old, heavy pair of binoculars pressed against the dirty glass of the sliding door look out over the sea. He remembers the smell of him when he came home, when he was finally folded into his father's arms, the smell of salt, sweat, fish and grease, the smell of money his uncles used to call it. He left school when he was 17, itching to get out onto the water, to join his uncles and father and pole his first tuna. It wasn't unusual. A lot of boys his age didn't complete school, instead taking up the family's trade. He remembers his first trip. It was cold and windy and the boat wouldn't stop rocking. He remembers being seasick and his dad laughing and patting him on the back as he emptied his stomach over the side. "You'll get used to it. Someday you'll be like me, an old man of the sea." He remembers the first night in his own bunk, a small room with a low ceiling that smelled of stale sweat. He remembers his first day poling, his youthful hands clumsy on the bamboo, leaving them raw by the end of the day. He most definitely remembers his first catch on a twin pole with his father by his side. He hasn't fished a day in his life without him since. They cast the line into the water and feel the muscles tense and lock as a tuna takes the bait. The tips of the poles snapping towards the water in frantic tugs. His father grunts under the strain, nodding his head quickly towards his son at the enormous weight on their line. They feel the tuna rising towards the surface, using the momentum to pull it clean from the depths. The pair swing it behind them, but it knocks into the boat, thrashing off the side and slamming the boy forward into the rails before yanking him overboard. Shouts echo across the deck. Cries of "man overboard" fill the air as the boy is dragged along behind the boat. He opens his mouth to scream for his father, but chokes on the water, being forced down his throat, unable to snatch a mouthful of air. His father watches as his son's waders fill, weighing him down, his head barely above water. He screams for him to kick them off as the tuna continue to writhe around him. Both men clutch their poles, not wanting to let the other go, a desperate lifeline binding them together. Men scramble from the racking, stopping the boat, trying to turn it around as the father cries out as his son's head disappears for the last time. He tosses down his pole, tearing at his waders and throwing himself into the sea, clawing at the waves to get to his boy. He can see him, out where they are. The water is crystal clear, a blessing and a curse. He dives down, eyes wide, despite the stinging of salt, kicking his legs to propel him towards his sinking child. He can't reach him, the water is too deep and the boy is sinking too fast. His weight is an anchor, intent on finding a place to rest. He will never forget the colour of his son's eyes, the brown of soil after it rains. How those eyes, once joyous and naive, stared unseeing in the cold water as he got further and further out of reach. A splash above him sounds as a crew member dives in, hands hooking the father under the arms and pulling him towards the surface. It's been years since the father stood alone on the deck, since the sea had separated him from his boy. Every man on the boat is quiet as they count each fathom of water between the pair, a twin bamboo pole bobbing on the surface. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika, for your words and Brittany for your voice. That's a wrap for tonight. Don't forget to check out Adelaide Fringe's shows and check out the last few events of Writers Essay's summer program, which is debut authors, young adult fantasy with Vanessa Len, author of Only a Monster, or editing with Cher Tan. Big thank you to everyone here tonight and everyone who couldn't make it. To all our writers, performers and contributors, anyone who travelled to the Riverland, thank you to Writers Essay and Adelaide Fringe. Thank you to the Restart Investment to Sustain and Expand Fund, and a government initiative, Art South Australia, the Chaffey Theatre and accommodating staff, and Tone Pit Media. Have a safe trip home, everybody, and good night.